Hello, lovelies. I just wanted to welcome you back to this month's vlog post of Sisters in Mental Illness. I'm so excited because today I have Michaela Evanow to come and talk. And if you've been around here and She Loves for a while, she's a familiar face because she's written for She Loves. She wrote for a very long time. In fact, that's how I found her. And I don't know if you know this, Michaela, but I remember I read one of your posts and the words and the way you wrapped words around things. I actually went back and read all the previous posts and stayed up till 3 in the morning.
Aww.
Yeah. And I was just I couldn't stop reading, and it was just, yeah, I can talk words, but I'm not wordsy with my words. They were just beautiful. I was thinking that I would because I just read your bio on your website, I just would love to read one part of what it says there. And then we'll get started. So I love how you just want to share stories. I'm similar that way. And it says here, I think our stories are like those fantastic children's books that offer various endings, twists and turns. Sometimes things just happen that are out of control, but we keep flipping the page to get the gold. Sometimes we take the paths that lead us into adventures and yes, heartache, but we all have stories. I love gathering them. They shape us and they are always being written.
Oh, wow. That was a while ago I wrote that.
Yeah, it's on the, I was looking at, just checking out the your website again, because we'll talk about it later, but you just put up a brand new, amazing post. I'm so excited about it. I think it's just gonna, I mean, I know that it helped me. I was screenshotting it and I'm like, okay, remember this, remember this. But yeah, I thought we could start, if you could just start a little bit of your story. I'm wondering what made you start or writing about mama grief?
Well, I mean, I wrote for years beforehand, and I kind of started writing when I was working as a traditional midwife in India, and there's obviously so many sad stories and stories of loss, and at that point I had no children, and I just continued to share, and people were responding, and I was a lot younger then too, so I didn't fully understand grief and loss and life in the developing world, and it was just sort of exploring that whole world of grief that I didn't even call it grief at that time. And then, of course, my story begins to unfold years later, and our first child, she was born, Florence, she was born healthy. So that's what we thought. So it was about 3 months later that we realized she was not well, and she was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. And at that time it was we're so sorry, there's nothing we can do, there's no cure for this, and she's going to die in a year or two if you're lucky. And I was just, yeah, I didn't, it was just I still am I can't believe that happened, that is still happening, and the aftershock is still happening. It still just feels like it's not a part of me or my story, because I never envisioned that in my life, because who wants to do that? So that's kind of, the grief started then. Again, I didn't really know it was grief. I just thought, okay, we have to chin up and keep going, and keep your daughter healthy, and just put your blinders on. And then she started to get weaker, and she started to have to be hospitalized, and her bones started to get weak, so she started breaking bones, and it was just all of these terrible things started happening. And then I realized okay, I'm in deep grief right now because my daughter is not well, and this isn't just special needs. This isn't just something that physiotherapy is going to fix. Like, she is not well. And it was a long period where I had to come to terms with her disease was terminal. And I had to basically tell myself, like, I think she's dying. This is what it looks like when your child is dying. Like, there's nothing I can do to stop this. There's nothing I can do to help her besides a bit of pain relief. Or, I mean, thank the Lord she didn't have a lot of pain, but it was just a very terrifying, weird, like, my hands were tied. So I just kind of embraced the grief at that point, that she was dying. And, you know, I went through a funny stage where when people would say, like, oh, like, you know, she'll get stronger, or she just needs some sort of therapy, or even strangers would ask, like, oh, is this going to get better over time? And I would just say, no, actually, she's in palliative care. Like, unless there's a miracle. Oh my goodness, sorry, my battery. Unless there's a miracle, like, she's dying. And I know it scared people, but for me, it was like, this is happening. I can't bury my head in the sand anymore. And I'm struggling to keep therapies going. And then we slowly just like, no, we don't need to go to that swim class anymore. We don't need to have that physiotherapy done. You know, as much as they had said, oh, we can come every couple of weeks. And I was like, you know what? It's not doing anything. Like, this isn't helping. And she hated it. She hated all those things. She hated people coming to the house. And so, yeah, it was a lot of grief in a lot of different ways. So just learning the complexities of grief has been really eye-opening, and the levels and how it changes me, you know.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. You said something about putting the blinders on, or having to just dig down, because I can imagine it was full on around the clock care. Did you have time, or was it when you were writing that you had time to try and process some of what was happening?
Yeah, it was definitely when I was writing. And it was processing the grief, and mostly the fear and anxiety. And at that point, I didn't have physical manifestations of anxiety. It was just all in my head, which is normal. Anyone in that experience, like in that world of medical emergencies and even just motherhood, like, is it going to be okay? Is today going to be okay? Is she going to get a cold? Do I have a cold? Am I feeling sick? If I get sick, is she going to get sick? It's almost Christmas time. We don't want to be in the hospital when she's sick. And like, it was constantly in my head. But I seemed fine. And we stayed at home a lot because I felt safe there, but mostly she was safe there. There was no germs there. So I forgot your question.
That's okay. No, you were totally answering it.
Okay.
You were talking about what you had to do.
Oh, yes.
To be able
blinders.
Yeah.
So writing helped me, but I, like, now in retrospect, I see that I wasn't processing it. I didn't go for any sort of counseling, maybe once or twice, because you know, when you're in that sort of world where it's really intense, and it's often shorter, like, you know, it can go on for 7 years for some people, or a year, but like, it all kind of depends on your time frame. And I think for us, for the 3-year period, it was like just short enough that I was like, I'm fine. I can do this. Like, I think if she had lived longer, I would have been like, okay, I'm starting to fall apart here. Yeah. But 3 years is really doesn't feel like a long time when you're in it. And so it all just kept happening. And I just was like, I have to survive this. And I, you know, had the blinders on because I had friends at the same time who had children who were totally well. And it was deeply painful to watch their kids a couple months apart in age, just doing all the things that Florence couldn't do. You know, it's kind of different when you're first time mom too. Like, You just have these levels of expectation and perfectionism, and like it's supposed to be a really beautiful thing, like, oh my gosh, they rolled over and they're sitting up and they're walking, and we just never had any of that. And the small things that we did have, she lost them. So it was just a level of loss and grief in every year of her life. So I don't even now, looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I would have processed in the midst of it. I would like to think that I would have, but how do you really, in like that kind of trauma, how do you, how do you do it?
Yeah. And then were you writing like right away after the diagnosis, or was there a time?
Yeah, I had been writing, I had been blogging beforehand and throughout my pregnancy, and it was all, I had, like I said, did that midwifery work overseas, and then I became a doula, and I was just loved the world of birth, and I had all these, I planned a water birth and no drugs, and that all happened. It was a beautiful birth, and it was just like, I'm gonna be cloth diapering, and and I was blogging about all of that, and I did do that, and then all of a sudden it was like, what am I doing? Like, you don't need to be cloth diapering, like your daughter is really sick. Like it just all came crashing down. All of this facade I had built up of like this perfect motherhood experience, this organic and green and all that's great, but it was like the first step in like loss, where I was like, you don't get to be that kind of mother right now, because you don't have time for it, because she can't eat like that, like all these different things,
Right.
So I just continued to write about how the diagnosis changed us, and it was deeply centered around faith and trusting God, and believing for a miracle and a breakthrough. And that was also a way that I coped.
Right.
Like, God is going to show up, and this is going to be fixed, because this is ridiculous, and this is impossible, and this is not supposed to happen, and I can't deal with this. So God's going to change it, because I can't handle it. So I don't have to handle it. And there's truth to that, but it was just part of the grief, the denial, that was, when I look back, that's the one thing I see a lot, is like denial. And so I wrote through a lot of that, and I go back and I can read some of my posts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you just were so, hi there, buddy. You were just so in pain and fear, and you made a place for God that only looked like this one thing. God could only show up looking like this. And then the story would be fine, and we would be well and fixed. So yeah, I still have, issues with reading old stuff, and some of the stuff I've taken down, and like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've changed so much, and I've learned so much, and it doesn't mean one is better than the other, but I literally feel like I was a baby or a teenager back then. And that's all part of the growth. And it was not, it was 6 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't like I was that immature. I just, I've seen the process through now, and it did not turn out how we wanted. And so you have to come to terms with that, and still leave room for God,
Wow. Yeah. Was there, you talked about thinking about the healing, but then accepting it. I can't imagine. I experienced anxiety in a different way. I've had different experiences. Mine, so much situational. I don't know when it started. I just have always, since teenagehood, and I'm wondering if you felt like this almost being torn between the past, thinking what could have been different, and the future, like what is going to happen. Did it feel like that at all?
Can we press pause?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, bud. Means just